12 stitches in a screaming toddler's eyebrow, and my hands were perfectly steady. That's who I am. That's who I've always been. 3 months after my divorce, I was picking up a prescription at the pharmacy counter near the children's wing when my former mother-in-law cornered me by the blood pressure machine. Denise Calloway had a smile that always looked like she was about to collect on a debt. She walked up close enough that the pharmacist looked over, and she said it loud enough for the whole waiting area to hear. My son finally got what he always wanted, a daughter, with a woman who can actually give him one. 5 years of being told I was the reason our house stayed empty, all wrapped into one sentence. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even blink. I just looked at her the way I look at a chart I already know the answer to, and I said, "Is that really what you think happened here?" 4 minutes later, a woman nobody in that pharmacy was expecting walked through the automatic doors. And by the time a judge was done with this story, the name everyone thought belonged on that birth certificate wasn't going to be the one that stayed there. Before we get into it, if you like quiet women getting their justice the slow, satisfying way, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from tonight. This is Hidden Karma Stories, and tonight's story is a long one, so settle in. Now let me take you back to 4 minutes before Denise opened her mouth, because the woman who walked through those doors didn't show up by accident. My name is Renee Castellan. I'm 34, and I've worked the pediatric floor at a hospital in Astoria, Oregon, for almost 9 years. That Tuesday, I'd swung by the pharmacy on my lunch break to pick up a refill, badge still clipped to my scrub top, hair falling out of its bun the way it always does by hour 6. I'd cut through that wing 100 times. I knew Denise volunteered there on Tuesdays, restocking the gift shop. I just hadn't clocked that it was a Tuesday. She'd clearly been waiting for an audience because she didn't whisper. She planted herself right in my path, looked at my scrubs like they were something she'd stepped in, and delivered her line like she'd rehearsed it in the car. I felt for the thin silver bracelet on my wrist, the one my late aunt gave me the year I started nursing school, and I pressed my thumb against the clasp the way I do when I need 3 extra seconds before I speak. I'd learned that lesson in the ICU a long time ago. The person who raises their voice first usually loses the room. "Is that really what you think happened here?" I asked again, softer. She blinked. She'd wanted tears. She got nothing. And somewhere behind her, the pharmacy's automatic doors hissed open. I didn't turn around yet. I didn't know who it was. I just knew somehow that the ground had shifted. Here's what you need to understand about me first, because none of the rest will make sense otherwise. I grew up outside Spokane, Washington, the kind of small town where the church bulletin doubles as the local news. My dad drove a delivery route for a regional grocery chain. My mom did hair out of our garage on weekends. I put myself through nursing school on loans and double shifts, and somewhere along the way I picked up a philosophy that worked great in a trauma room and terribly in a marriage. Keep your head down, do the work, and the truth eventually speaks for itself. That belief kept me calm while I bagged a kid's broken arm or talked a panicking father through his daughter's asthma attack. It did not protect me from the people closest to me deciding, quietly, that a lie about my body was easier to live with than the truth about someone else's. I married Tyler Calloway when I was 26. He was the kind of charming that made waitresses remember his name. For 3 years, we tried for a baby. Nothing happened. The nothing sat at our dinner table like a third chair nobody used. I suggested we both get basic fertility testing, blood work, nothing invasive, the kind of workup I'd recommend to any patient. Tyler laughed it off the first time. The second time, he got cold and quoted his father at me, something about Calloway men don't have those issues. Like infertility was a character flaw that skipped his bloodline by birthright. I let it go. I told myself patience was a virtue, not a trap. I got tested on my own, quietly, at a clinic 2 towns over. Normal results, every marker. I sat in the parking lot afterward with the paper in my lap, relieved and completely lost at the same time. If it wasn't me, then what was it? I didn't have an answer, and the silence around that question gave other people room to invent one for me. Denise Calloway ran her church's hospitality committee the way some people run a small country. She'd raised Tyler alone after her husband passed, and somewhere in those years she decided her son's perfection was the proof that her sacrifice had been worth it. If Tyler had a flaw, it reflected on her. So when Tyler started murmuring to her that maybe the problem was me, she didn't question it. She picked it up and ran a full marketing campaign with it. It started as sympathetic sighs at potlucks. By the second year, it had teeth. At a church supper that fall, she introduced me to a visiting pastor's wife and said, with a little tilt of her head, "This is Renee, she's a nurse, bless her. Such a shame about the grandbabies." The pastor's wife gave me a sad nod, like she already knew the whole story. I stood there holding a paper plate of potato salad and realized the gossip had arrived at the party before I had. Denise had a line she repeated for years, the way other people repeat a Bible verse. "Some women's bodies just aren't built for that kind of blessing." She said it gently. She believed it completely. That was the worst part. She wasn't trying to be cruel. She was just repeating a lie her son had handed her, polished smooth, and she had no idea it was a lie at all. My best friend through all of it was a woman named Brooke Linden. We'd known each other since middle school in Spokane. She moved out to the coast a year after I did, and we picked up right where we left off. She was at my wedding. She sat with me in the ER waiting room the night my dad had his first heart scare. When the church gossip started wearing me down, Brooke was the one who showed up with takeout and let me cry on her couch. Looking back, every bit of comfort she gave me had a quiet hook buried in it. "You're so career-focused, Renee. Maybe motherhood just isn't your path. Tyler adores you. Don't let his mom get to you." Kind words that always somehow landed on the same bruise. I never noticed how much she knew about Tyler's schedule. I never noticed how her eyes tracked him across a room. I was too grateful to have one person who didn't seem to be judging me to ask why she knew so much. Tyler filed for divorce on a Friday in early spring. I came home from a 12-hour shift to find a folder of paperwork on the kitchen island and half his closet gone. By the following week, he'd moved in with Brooke, 2 towns down the coast. The story that spread through our church and our families was tidy and merciless. Renee couldn't give him a family, and a man deserves children, doesn't he? Denise made sure every pew heard the updated version. Brooke said nothing to correct any of it. I didn't fight back. I didn't post anything online, didn't call anyone to defend myself. I went back to work and held a screaming 6-year-old's hand through a cast application, and that felt like the only honest thing happening in my life that week. If you've ever swallowed a lie about yourself just to keep some fragile piece intact, you already know what that tastes like. It tastes like something you're not allowed to spit out. Comment below if you've lived that, and stay with me, because the piece didn't last much longer. I'd been next in line for the nurse manager position on my floor for almost 2 years. I'd built half the intake protocols the unit still used. The promotion was as good as mine until the whispers found the hearing committee. Not facts, just shape. Her personal life is a mess. Questions about her judgment. Did you hear about the divorce? A committee member who golfed with Tyler's uncle started asking pointed questions about my stability under pressure, as if I hadn't spent 9 years staying level-headed while children bled on my exam table. The job went to someone with a third of my tenure. They told me it was a close call. I'd grown up around small towns. I knew exactly what a close call dressed up as a compliment sounded like. That night, sitting in my car in the hospital lot, I understood something for the first time. The silence I'd been so proud of had a price tag, and somebody else had been running up the bill for years. A coworker gave me the number for an attorney named Patricia Nguyen, whose office sat above a bakery in downtown Astoria. She had reading glasses pushed up into gray-streaked hair and the patience of someone who'd heard every version of this story before. I told her everything: the marriage, the gossip, the lost promotion. She listened without interrupting, which I came to learn was rare for a lawyer. "What you're describing could be defamation," she said. "Maybe false light, depending on how it's framed. I won't sugarcoat it, it's an uphill case." She laid out what we'd need: a specific false statement, proof it spread to others, and proof it caused real, measurable harm. "The harm part is the easy part," she said. "A lost promotion has a dollar figure attached to it. And the false part, that's the part you have to be willing to fight about, out loud, in a room full of people who already think they know you. They'll say the statement was true. that you really couldn't have kids, and to win, you'd have to be ready to prove it wasn't you. I felt my stomach drop, because of course I couldn't prove that outright. My results were normal, but normal doesn't say whose fault the silence was. It only says it wasn't mine. I spent almost 3 weeks deciding. I made 2 lists, the way I triage everything, what I stood to lose, and what I'd already lost by staying quiet. The first list was full of things like reputation and church friendships and the comfort of staying invisible. The second list had exactly one thing on it: the truth, sitting unused in a drawer while I let other people spend it. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I'd had a year of chances to go after Tyler out of spite, and I hadn't taken any of them. I was doing this so the next time my name came up in a room I wasn't in, it came up clean. I called Patricia on a Monday morning before my shift. "I'm in," I told her. "Good," she said. "Then let's make them say it under oath." Patricia drafted the complaint over the following weeks. The dates, the witnesses, the lost wages, all of it organized and numbered like a chart. When it was filed, word moved through our small coastal community faster than any ambulance I'd ever ridden in. Denise told her hospitality committee I'd let bitterness poison me. She doubled down on every word she'd ever said about me, which, though she didn't know it yet, was exactly what Patricia had hoped she'd do. Tyler's attorney had 2 options, Patricia explained. Call the statement's opinion, nothing actionable, annoying but survivable. Or plant a flag and insist the statements were true, that I really had been the reason there was no baby. They picked the second option. Of course they did. Patricia practically lit up when she called to tell me. "They just claimed under oath that the infertility was definitely yours," she said. "Which means if they want to keep saying that, they can't hide his medical records anymore. It's not a wide-open door. It's a crack, but I can work with a crack." I sat down hard at my kitchen table. Meaning they just put his fertility in play too. We may finally get to ask the question nobody in your marriage was ever allowed to ask out loud. That night I couldn't sleep, so I did what I always do when something doesn't sit right. I went back through old memories slowly, like rereading a chart for the thing I missed the first time. 6 years earlier, early in our marriage, Tyler had driven up to Seattle alone for what he called a routine physical. He came home different, quiet in a way that wasn't like him, sharp over nothing, pouring himself a drink before dinner on a Tuesday, which he never did. When I asked if everything was okay, he said the doctor up there was an idiot and the whole trip was a waste of a day. He never brought up testing again. Not once. And the first whispers about my body started circulating within a few weeks of that trip. I'd filed it away at the time as a man having a bad day. I hadn't been looking for a lie, so I hadn't found one. I told Patricia about it the next morning. "On its own, that's nothing," she said. "But it's a reason to ask the right question." Because the defense had put my fertility at issue and claimed the fault was mine, she could now ask the court to compel production of Tyler's relevant medical records. Tyler's lawyer fought the motion hard. Nobody fights that hard over nothing. Before the judge ruled, I had to sign a verified complaint. Every statement, every date, attested under penalty of perjury. Patricia set the stack in front of me with little tabs marking every place my signature needed to go. "Read every line," she said. "Sign only what you know is true." I read all of it. The potluck, the pastor's wife, Denise's exact words about blessings and bodies, the lost promotion and the number attached to it. Seeing my own quiet years laid out in numbered paragraphs made the lie look as thin as it actually was. I picked up the pen and noticed the smell of Patricia's office, old paper and bakery sugar drifting up through the floorboards, nothing like the antiseptic hospital smell that used to be my only safe place. I wasn't hiding in this room. I'd had to walk out into the open to get here. I signed clean and certain, the steadiest signature I'd put on anything in over a year. The ruling came on a gray Thursday afternoon while I was on shift. Patricia called, and I stepped into a supply closet between the gauze and the saline bags to take it. "The judge granted it," she said. "With limits, but she granted it. Tyler's relevant fertility records were now presumptively discoverable, not public, but reviewable under a protective order. "We don't know what's in the file yet," Patricia warned, "but they can't keep it shut anymore." I stood in that closet and let out a breath I think I'd been holding for 6 years. The first crack on their side didn't come from Tyler or Denise. It came from Brooke. She texted me out of nowhere after more than a year of total silence. "Please drop this. Think about the baby." I read it 3 times. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. She'd taken my marriage and never once reached out, and now she was begging me to stop a lawsuit that, on paper, had nothing to do with her at all. People who beg you to stop digging usually already know what's buried. I didn't answer her. I just sat with the question and felt the shape of something I couldn't see yet starting to take form. If you've ever been the calm one while everyone around you panicked, hit subscribe because the calm is about to pay off. And tell me in the comments where you'd have stopped. I almost did. Twice. The file came 8 days later. I didn't see it first. I'm a nurse, and I have no legal right to anyone else's medical records, not even my ex-husband's, and I wouldn't have looked even if I could have. It went through Patricia, under the protective order, reviewed with opposing counsel present. She called and asked me to come to her office, which she'd never done before. I knew before I sat down. "6 years ago," she said, sliding a single sheet across the desk, the rest blacked out under seal, "Tyler was diagnosed at a clinic in Seattle." The word on the page was one I'd written on patient charts more times than I could count: azoospermia. No measurable sperm production. He had been told in plain clinical language that he could not father a biological child. 6 years ago, the same week he came home from Seattle different, the same stretch of weeks the whispers about my body began. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. Something enormous and quiet rearranged itself inside me, like a joint sliding back into place after years of sitting wrong. For 5 years, I had carried the shame of an empty nursery that was never mine to carry. The man who let an entire town believe it was mine had known the truth the whole time. I expected triumph. What I felt instead was something closer to grief. 5 years of pitying looks, of lying awake wondering what was wrong with me, of absorbing a wound that belonged to someone else entirely. Tyler had handed me his shame, and his mother had pinned it to my back with both hands, and neither of them had ever once considered taking it back. Sitting in my car outside Patricia's office, I said the same thing out loud that I'd said to Denise in that pharmacy. "Is that really what you think happened here?" Only now I understood what I'd actually been asking. The real answer had been sitting in a sealed file an hour up the coast the whole time. I was never broken. I never had been. And then a colder question rose up that I couldn't push back down. If Tyler couldn't father a child 6 years ago, and the diagnosis held, then the baby girl Denise had bragged about by the blood pressure machine. The daughter Tyler was parading around as proof of his manhood. The child he'd left me to go make with my best friend could not be his. Either the clinic had made an extraordinarily rare error, or the baby everyone believed was Tyler's daughter had a different father entirely. I didn't know which, but I knew it was a real question now, not a rumor. And Brooke's midnight text suddenly made horrible sense. She hadn't been protecting Tyler's feelings. She'd been protecting a secret only she fully understood. I want to be precise about what I did next, because it matters to me that I did this the right way. I never went looking into the baby's records. I had no right to, and I wouldn't have anyway. That child was innocent in every part of this. What I had was a contradiction the Callaways had built entirely with their own hands. They'd sworn under oath the infertility was mine. The record said it was Tyler's. And a healthy baby girl across town said somebody, somewhere, was lying about something far bigger than a marriage. I called Patricia. "I think there's more here," I told her. "Then we let the court find it," she said. "Not us." The man who walked through the pharmacy doors that day had a name: Marcus Webb. I learned about him slowly, the same way I learned everything else in this story, through the channels that don't lie. During the months Brooke and Tyler were getting together in secret, Brooke had also been seeing Marcus. A quiet, steady guy who'd believed the relationship meant something real. When she chose Tyler, she cut Marcus off completely, blocked his number, never told him she was pregnant, never mentioned a due date. She'd gambled that he'd just fade away. He hadn't. The timeline never sat right with him, and he'd kept gently asking around. That morning, someone who knew them both had let slip where Denise would be and when. So Marcus came to the pharmacy to see, with his own eyes, the child he suspected might be his. The second he walked through those doors, Brooke's face, 5 steps behind Denise, went completely white. That's the image I want you to sit with. Denise, smug by the blood pressure machine, certain her son's perfect new life proved I was worthless. And behind her, walking through automatic doors, living proof that the perfect life was built on exactly the same kind of lie they'd buried me under for years. Tyler knew. That's the part that turns this from sad into something close to unforgivable. He knew for 6 years he couldn't father a child. So when Brooke turned up pregnant, he knew with total certainty the baby wasn't his, and he took the win anyway. He stood in front of his mother, his church, his whole small world, and let them believe he'd finally given a family the thing his barren first wife couldn't. He used a child who wasn't his to finish the story he'd been writing about me for years. When Patricia told me Tyler's lawyer had stopped fighting and asked to talk settlement instead, I understood exactly why. He wasn't scared of losing the lawsuit anymore. He was scared of what the lawsuit would say, out loud. About the daughter, he'd been showing off at every church potluck for months. Denise showed up at my apartment the Sunday before the hearing, still in her church clothes. She didn't apologize, I want to be honest about that. She asked me to drop it. Not for Tyler, she said, voice cracking. For the family name, for the baby. For one breath, I actually felt for her. She'd been lied to by her own son for 6 years and had spent every one of those years defending him with everything she had. She wasn't evil. She was used. Then she said her old line one more time, except now it came out pleading instead of certain. Some women's bodies just aren't built for that kind of blessing, Renee. Why drag everyone through this? And I understood, even standing on the edge of the truth. She'd rather protect the lie than let it go. Go home, Denise, I said quietly. The mud was never mine to carry. She left without another word. Tyler's lawyer offered a quiet settlement, a payout, a private retraction to my hospital's board, everything sealed and never spoken of again. On paper, it was a win. Patricia laid it out fairly and let me sit with it. I thought about it for a long time. Then I said no. Not out of spite. A private apology was just a quieter version of the same lie. For 5 years, Denise had said it out loud, in churches, at potlucks, in front of crowds. The correction needed to live in exactly the same kind of room. I'm not going to let this get whispered in private, I told Patricia. I'll say it once where it counts and then I'm done. Then we go to court, she said. Wear something you can breathe in. The hearing was held on a cold, clear morning at the county courthouse. The room filled the way these things do in small towns. 2 members of the hospital board, several women from Denise's church committee, Denise herself rigid in the second row, Tyler pale beside his attorney, and Brooke near the back, perfectly still, with Marcus sitting 2 rows behind her, close enough that she could feel him without turning around. Patricia never raised her voice once. She built it the way I'd build a diagnosis, one finding at a time, calm and unhurried, until there was only one conclusion left standing. The statements, the dates, the witnesses, the lost promotion and its exact dollar figure. Then, because the defense itself had insisted the infertility was mine, she read the line the protective order allowed into the record. 6 years earlier, Tyler Calloway had been diagnosed with a condition that made fathering a biological child essentially impossible. The room's temperature changed. Patricia added, gently and without drama, that paternity testing in a related custody matter had not supported Tyler's biological fatherhood of the child in question. Tyler stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. That's not, you can't, his voice cracked across the courtroom. The judge told him to sit. Denise was on her feet too, saying my name like it was an accusation, insisting I'd twisted everything. I sat perfectly still and said nothing at all. Then she turned on me, grabbing for the only thing she had left. Some women's bodies just aren't built for that kind of blessing, she cried, finger shaking. Some women just... She couldn't finish it a second time. I stood up slowly. I'd waited 6 years. I wasn't going to rush the last 30 seconds of it. You're right, Denise, I said, calm and clear, the same voice I used to tell a family something hard and true. You're exactly right. One person in that marriage was never built for that kind of blessing. I let it sit. I looked at Tyler, then back at her. The file only ever had his name on it. The room went completely silent. Denise's hand dropped. Tyler put his face in his hands. The women from the church committee sat frozen, watching 5 years of certainty rearrange itself in real time. There was no shouting match after that, no dramatic exit, just quiet collapse. Tyler's attorney asked for a recess and didn't come back with a fight. The church women filed out with their eyes down. Denise followed, smaller than I'd ever seen her. Brooke slipped out during the recess, and Marcus rose from his seat and walked out the same door, close behind her. Patricia put a hand on my shoulder. You did that without raising your voice once, she said. 30 years of doing this, and that's still rare. The aftermath came the way it usually does, quietly, in pieces. Tyler's standing in town evaporated within weeks. You can't outrun a courthouse in a place that small. He moved out of state a few months later, somewhere fresh, somewhere the story hadn't traveled yet. The hospital board called me in without much ceremony and told me the nurse manager position was open again, that they'd reviewed everything and found the original concerns without merit. Nobody quite apologized. From a hospital board, that's about as close as you get. I took the job not to prove anything else, but because it had always been mine. My first week back, I walked into the unit and breathed in that same antiseptic smell that used to be the only place no one called me broken. It smelled different now. Earned, not borrowed. Denise lost the committee she'd run for years, not because I said a word against her, but because the truth was too big to stay contained in a town that size. I heard she stopped attending altogether. I felt something close to sadness about that. The sadness you feel for someone who chose the lie right up until the lie took everything from her too. Brooke and Marcus worked out the question of paternity through the courts, the right way. I hope, for that little girl's sake, they found something steady on the other side of it. She never asked for any of this. Brooke and I never spoke again. Some friendships don't really break. You just find out they were never what you thought they were, and you set them down along with everything else. I wrote Denise one short note afterward. Not angry, not long. I won't carry your son's lie anymore. You shouldn't either. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. But writing it closed something I'd been carrying for a long time. I still wear my aunt's bracelet every day. She used to tell me that patience isn't about waiting, it's about knowing the exact moment when waiting is finally over. I waited 6 years for mine. It came, and I met it standing up. If there's one thing I'd want you to take from this, it's that the truth doesn't need you to chase it down. It just needs you to stop being afraid of it, long enough to ask the right question out loud, in the one room where it finally counts. If this story reached you tonight, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, if you were sitting in Renee's seat, would you have taken the quiet settlement or gone to court like she did? Drop your answer below. Subscribe for the next one, and I'll see you there.